We got a good group of people here live, and shout out to all of you that listen on your favorite podcasting platform as well.
YouTube is our most popular channel right now, right? Is that what the data is saying?
Yeah, it blew my mind. As a Spotify listener myself and a never used YouTube for a podcast, I'm stunned at how many people are listening.
Me and my YouTube premium homies that are listening in are celebrating this W. Sorry for interrupting, John.
I had my fancy spiel that I was about to start with, but that's okay. I could start again. This is the Home for Ambition. I'm John Colliker, and we have here Mike Mella and Jake Lingwall. We're very excited to be here. This is our episode number 7, which is 7 more than the haters thought we'd do. So excited to be here.
Unstoppable at this point.
We got a packed agenda, a bunch of topics we want to go through. And yeah, for those of you that are in the chat, feel free to drop questions, comments. It's fun to get some banter going. And for those of you listening, we'll make sure we bring you along for the ride. Mike, you got our first topic. Do you want to kick it off for us?
Yes, this is one that has been blowing my mind, really. So there was recently a study published that showed usage of AI tools, or specifically LLMs, by income bracket. So at the top of the chart, you had Claude, in which 80% of users were making over $100,000 a year. And then that remaining 20% was primarily people making 75 to 100,000, with almost none of users being in like the 75,000 or below. At the bottom end of the spectrum, you have Meta AI, which was only 37% over 100,000, and then pretty good distribution of other income brackets for that remaining 63%. The order going the highest income bracket being Claude, then Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT in the middle, followed by Grok, Google Gemini, and Meta AI at the bottom. So question number 1 is, why do you think that is? And then question number 2 is, what do you think the long-term implications of this are, both for society and the LLM tools themselves?
Are you asking me, a Claude user, or are you asking John, who most people assume are more of a Gemini or GPT type of user? This is what I'm excited about. I have a new way to subtly shame people. It's like
be like a classist derogatory term.
Yeah, it's like calling someone a Hufflepuff, or sticking your nose up somewhere. As my first reaction, and I'll let John answer the question now that I've got that out of the way, is, as a Claude user, I think there's only positive implications here on society.
Yeah, I think it's obviously corporate budgets influencing this, and the freemium model influencing the bottom half. So Gemini is an interesting one because there is like Gemini corporate, and then there's Gemini free. And so Google, to their credit, have always kind of spanned all of the different classes of income brackets because their model is free, or your company pays for it. You choose, right? So either way, it's going to be free to the end user. And I think that's pretty cool. Versus ChatGPT versus Claude, which is basically saying we're never going to have ads, and never having ads is basically code for we're never going to be a mass consumer tool, because turns out consumers want free. So I think that the only way you do free is if you have a massive advertising business on top of it. That's illustrated by Meta, Gemini, and Grok, probably in order of the largest, or maybe Meta and Gemini are similar, but Meta's reliance on the advertising model to serve it for free is greater than Gemini, who also does sell it as a part of a premium enterprise package. So that's why it's happening. I think what will happen because of it, I mean, it's hard to say that you have really strong right or left leaning models. I think most of these companies are built by left leaning engineers on average. So I think as long as you don't let bias into the models as much as you possibly can, I think that you're probably going to have a similar type of influence. But I'd love to hear what you guys think as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There was a big hypothetical ethical question that went around on X this past week of blue button, red button. If people aren't familiar, everyone in the world has to take a test. If you press a blue button and over 50% of people press it, no one will die, or only the people who press the red button. And we don't have to get into the ethical debates of it. But what was really interesting is you typically had more liberal or left-leaning association for people who press blue buttons. And then the higher income models also tended to lean left as well. They were all picking blue button. And then the the other models were all pressing the red button. So actually what it was recommending people do in this ethical situation seems to be, to some extent, influenced by the type of users using this model.
I mean, I think it's really interesting to think about, if how much people rely on AI to varying degrees, right? And we're gonna end up in like an old elementary school like situation where it's like, well, my dad said this, and someone's like, well, my mom said the opposite, and it's like it'll be interesting when so many people let AI be their arbiter of truth, and then truth is disagreeing on which platform. And that's interesting when you layer over the economic layer of it, because it's like, is the truth for the rich or the wealthy going to be a different truth than for the less advantaged folks? And that's a fairly potential dystopian thing, or maybe that's a reflection of like how it's always been. If you don't believe in like deterministic truth, there's relative truth, and maybe that does differ by the market you're serving.
Well, I think there's, maybe to your point, Jake, there's almost like the reliance on the models is likely also different. The type of reliance is different at the different income levels. So if you assume that like the Claude users or the company funded users that are earning more and are using it for their work, it's possible that that group is using it as a tool more than they are as like a replacement for learning or whatever. And so if, there's a chance that like at the lower income levels, they're also more, it's kind of like fake news, right? Like how does fake news affect people of different income levels? It's like fake news has been tricking my like random high school friend since the very beginning. And like, they're spiraling because of it. Fake news doesn't necessarily affect a ton of like my colleagues because they kind of know that it's fake. And so I think similarly with a model, you end up like perhaps Meta's AI becomes like more of a pillar of someone's like psyche than Claude might be on the average user, which is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, either way, probably best practice to use multiple models. I think people have been saying that for a while. Like the best way to review your code is like have Claude write it and then Codex review it. Probably something to that in broader life.
Yeah, but I think that's probably good advice, but I don't think that's actually what's going to happen, right? Like, I think people tend to listen to the news, like they tend to listen to the news that is like telling them what they want to hear. And so a lot of people are like, oh, this news station or that news station radicalized my parents or something. And it's kind of like, no, I think your parents were one way and they found the offering that aligned with their views and they believe that's the truth. And it's like, I imagine people will likely filter in AI in the same way. If you go ask a question to every different AI, you're probably going to use the one by default that agrees with your presuppositions the most.
Yeah, for sure.
That's fair. Can I bring up the next topic? Because I know we got a bunch we got to work through today. I wanted to so one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about and talking to the team about is the concept of like building the thing that builds the thing versus just, building the thing. Maybe to give an example, right now, every single person that's using AI in their work is faster than they've ever been before, right? They are moving at a rate that's like exhilarating. It's like almost addicting to them because they're just producing so much more code, so much more output, so much more content, whatever it might be, right? So there's this natural temptation to like just keep doing that because you're already 10, 20, 30, 50, 70 times faster or 70% faster. Now, the reality is if you can build the agent or the system that does your work for you, and you're just like an orchestrator or tuning that system or tuning that agent or reviewing its output at the very end, you have a much greater potential to be effective or impactful. But it's hard because you kind of have to like stop executing in order to start building the system. Do you guys agree with that? Do you agree with that being the holy grail? Do you agree with people kind of struggling with that tension? Which roles are struggling? I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, like I cannot agree more with getting sucked into the addicting, like let's just go build things now that they're so easy to build. Speaking, for myself from a product role, like the roadmap has been infinitely long forever. And the fact that we can now tackle it so much faster makes so I'm like really hungry to build a lot of features. But in reality, you probably need to be disciplined in saying, hey, instead of building these features, even though we could build them way faster than we used to do, let's take a step back and say, what do we need to build so that we can build anything we want? Part of the problem it's hard to do that is no one really knows how to build like the mythical AI employee yet. Like you have people who've reported doing it. You'll see these posts that's like, I replaced my CMO with an AI agent and look at what it did. And it's hard to know if that's real or like exaggerated. And so if there were like a perfect playbook of like, okay, I could buy this AI employee or build this AI employee that does everything, maybe I would, but I need to go figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like it's hard to know if people have actually successfully built these AI employees. I kind of think some people have figured it out very well. And it might be easier a starting point to start before you're like trying to look at an individual human and try and figure out all the facets of what that person does versus identifying the job to be done and keeping it narrow. And I do think it's like the natural evolution of leverage, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, right? Of like moving up to a management level and managing your agents and stuff like that. And I think, at the base level, you're like doing the work. And then in any management job, AI or not, it's like, well, you start designing systems of how the work is done. And like, that's the next level of abstraction where you can really move things. And the level above that, like the director level is like, well, you design the systems that design the systems that design how things are built, right? And it's like, you just kind of keep moving up this level. And I don't know if a lot of people are ready to like try and skip 3 levels up to like designing the systems that design the systems that build the work, when I'm not sure people are good enough or in tune enough with the actual job functions of how the work is being done. And so I think my point here is like the depth needed, I think, to do this really excellently, and like any job, is going to take a ton of attention to detail. And I don't know if you can skip straight to designing the systems that design the systems or this or that. Like, I don't know if you can skip straight to trying to replace full employees without doing some of the work to get really good at each tactical experience that a job entails. And so I get hesitant because I'm not sure people have nailed all the aspects of the job first.
Yeah, I think it almost like, I think it helps to break down like, what does an employee do? Like what is like the fundamental building blocks? And if you say, okay, employees are executing tasks with like a judgment layer on top, right? And so then you basically say, okay, well, the starting point then would be, let's try to automate some of the tasks. That's why coding agents have become so popular, because at any given day, an engineer might pick up 17 different tasks of different sizes, right? And if you have a coding agent that's capable of knocking out like 5 of those tasks, well, great. Like, you don't even really need the judgment layer on top, because you knew the task execution was good enough that you could then have like a real engineer go and review it on top. So that's why like coding agents have worked really well. I think for something that's like marketing, maybe you have, you're like sourcing influencers and you're creating content and you have all these different things, and you still need to break down that task. I think like the way to do it probably feels like trying to confine the set of tasks in a way that allows you to then like build the automations or the routines, the schedules, the skills, whatever it is, the triggers. And then maybe you can start to like work on the judgment layer within like a couple of different things. Or maybe you just say, hey, I as the person want to be the judgment layer for a really long time, and I'm just going to work on the tasks. But really, I think the judgment layer on top is actually the autonomy that you're looking for, right? Like that's where you get a lot of leverage from the task scheduling. But I think the holy grail is actually the like, how do I decide which of the tasks matter, when to do it, what the triggers are. Yeah,
it reminds me of when we were building Leland in the early days. We were built on the backs of a lot of interns. Like at one point, we had like 12 full-time employees and like 15 or 20 interns supporting those full-time employees. And how we thought about it is, a full-time employee would come in and they would build a playbook of what we know works. And then once you knew that playbook worked, you could hire an intern or an employee to go run that playbook over and over again. And so this is kind of like, can you do that all over again? Or like, can you hire someone to make that happen?
Yeah, I think so. This is like, it's so hard to like speak so broadly about so many different aspects of like all the different use cases for every employee ever. But I do feel like the intern example is a good one of like, you're hiring a bunch of different interns, and like the hard part is not usually to get like pay an intern to show up. It's like make sure they're all focused on like the right thing. And the best interns are like coming back to you and not just completing tasks, but like giving you feedback on how to improve and like master this space and be creative. And I think that part of the employee is going to be really hard to get done really well. And
yeah, it's like it's the barrel and the ammunition, right? Like that's what it is.
Yeah. So to me, I haven't had that like magic moment where I've been like convinced that's like this is a true employee, like a partner in building something versus like this thing is just really good at cranking through all of this tightly defined tasks that are empowering. And so I think I'm still looking for that magic moment. I don't doubt that it exists, but I think it is kind of hard. To your point, original point, John, it seems like hard to get to, and maybe the holy grail is because that this is what we're all chasing, and you just have to go on the Last Crusade or whatever Indiana Jones movie it was where they found it before you can get to the end.
I think people are building really cool things. Like even at Leland, we have employees that are running like full growth playbooks fully autonomously. What needs to happen, and you've actually advocated for this in the past, is everyone needs to become an engineer. And I don't think that is the engineer in terms of I build things, but what is the engineering process that makes so you can trust what you've built? So it's like really good documentation, peer reviewed, prioritization and roadmap building. So to your point, John, one of the things that makes building an AI employee really easy for code is that the code is documentation of how things work. But I don't necessarily have that equivalent for my marketing playbook. So if I want to build a marketing employee, I need to go document everything incredibly thoroughly. And so I imagine that the future is going to be everyone needs to document so much more about what they do or be more clever in context.
Yeah, I think that's like the YC request for startups company brain thing where, I think a lot of companies right now are trying to build their own company brain because it's basically a context engineering problem. And they're realizing that until you context engineering, I think, helps with the ammunition and the barrel, I guess. So the execution and the strategy, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's like what AI has been incredibly good at is ammunition for things that you have a lot of context, right? It'll bricklay for you like none other. It'll create a lot of slides, really nice slides, very well. I think there's probably a couple things that it needs an additional layer of context that is perhaps too big for a context window that would allow it to be more of an actual barrel that could make decisions more effectively. And I think that's what companies are trying to solve with the company brain or with context engineering or with, the layer of abstraction. It's all just the same. I think it's all with the same goal of being a true barrel.
It feels like such a hard problem to solve.
Well, that's why there's good money in it. That's why Y Combinator wants to fund it, right? So I do think it's something we will, as we're attempting to do it, I hope to have these, like, we'll crack some things and come back to the podcast with some magic moments where it feels like I have a true employee versus just automation. And automation is definitely super powerful right now. And maybe the fine line, this is like philosophical debate, which I'm not going to get into, of like, what is our general artificial intelligence if it's just so good at always answering your questions and predicting next tokens? Is that essentially the same thing as thinking or not? Maybe enough automations does make.
All right. My opinion is that it is. Go for it.
No, I wanted to follow up real quick. I threw what AI are you using up in the live chat poll here. We only have Claude users here. So we only have high class listeners to this podcast, 100,000 plus makers statistically. Exciting update around the community we're building here.
I love it.
John just threw a chat GPT.
I use Claude mostly, but I use ChatGPT a little bit, just trying to show some love to chat.
Do you guys mind if you reference like the YC wanting to fund stuff? Do you mind if we like just spin through their recent list of companies they're looking to fund? See if you have any quick reactions from you guys. They just published their latest cohort. And those that don't know what YC is, I'm guessing if you're fine Claude users, you're aware of it. But they're a big accelerator and firm that will invest in many startups. They're like probably the most famous of this by a wide margin, would you say?
Yes. Yeah.
they're like the 1,000-pound gorilla here. And these are the companies they're looking to fund if you want to apply to their patch. And this, for ambitious people, I think always interesting, even if you're not going to go build these yourselves. So the first one they have is AI for low pesticide agriculture, which sounds really interesting. The pitch is instead of running on chemicals, you use AI to like grow food safely.
I mean, it does feel like AI for X physical world problem is obviously going to be like massive. And I think they're going to start like the first wave of YC was like everyone building the, the wrapper and the software layer. I think YC has probably started to feel a little bit more like, all right, that's like in Anthropic's kill zone. So let's like, some of the other ones they included like SaaS challengers. Like, what does that mean? Well, it's like they're basically saying we're looking to fund people that are trying to go against the SaaS model, which has basically been like everything YC has made money on over the last little bit. Not everything they've built. They funded some marketplaces too, but they're now calling for companies trying to kill what their historical has been. The other one they're calling for is software for agents, which is interesting. So it's like software for non-people or software for people that's not priced like we normally used to price it, or software for physical work.
Yeah, all of the VC trite advice they've been giving for the past decade is suddenly terrible advice. And VCs are like trying to figure out what advice do we give. For example, I was talking to a VC yesterday who was saying he really wants to see like selling to governments or farmers, which I had worked in VC 5 years ago. And we had a rule that said never do ag tech and never do gov tech because those sales cycles are too hard and are terrible. Someone's saying the exact opposite, because to your point, if it's really hard to sell to these groups of people, that might be the most defensible thing you have in saying, why will an LLM company not come in and eat my lunch?
Yeah, I think you guys have hit a lot of them already. The first one is the agriculture. Swarm defense is on their list. Pretty sure only people buying that are going to be government-based stuff. I don't know. Maybe there's private counter swarm companies out there. AI for everything, John. Basically, their list of like 14 or 15 are all just AI in different spaces.
Can I throw out the two that I thought were interesting? So I mentioned the AI company brain, and then there was another one that was AI operating system for companies.
Yeah,
just kind of like the other way of saying that exact thing. They put it twice. Why hasn't Notion or Granola or Zoom or anyone that's already collecting a ton of context, why haven't they been able to figure this out? This feels like the most obvious productivity, or Slack. Like, how come Slack hasn't built the company brain or the company operating system? It feels like the biggest prize there is right now is like where all your context lives. And it feels like right now when I'm working with Claude, I'm just stitching together a million context sources rather than having everything right back to like one place.
It's hard, maybe. I mean, is that like the Occam's razor answer is like, it seems obvious. They're calling for it. There's like 10 different distinctions of companies that are trying to do this. And even before it was like AI or Notion, it's like a classic like data warehouse play, right? Where it's like flow all your data, all your stuff into one destination is, I don't know, maybe it's still hard.
Yeah, we'll go for it, Mike. Did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe to illustrate why this is hard. We have a Slack channel called Product, and anyone in the company can post a product idea. And so we get like dozens of them or even hundreds of them every week of people recommending new features, changes to existing features. So if you run this through an AI agent and you say, this is what Leland thinks the product needs to be, it might go implement all of those changes. The problem is, one, some of those changes might be terrible ideas. And two, there's nuance of, okay, the CEO recommended a feature versus like someone who got onboarded yesterday and has no context to why a feature exists the way that it does. And how do you, understand the nuance between who's recommending the feature and therefore like the weight you should put towards it? You may say that like too much data may work against you in trying to like find signal through the noise.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think I disagree with that. I think more data. I think the reason AI has a hard time making a decision is because they actually have less data. They have less context, right? Like the reason I think we make good decisions, we have all this historical knowledge of like everything that went wrong and why and like the companies we've studied that are outside of our company. And so I actually think there's probably there's an amount of context that matters so much. I think there's sort of like two things here though. One is like the first step is just gather all the data in one place. And that's what I'm saying is like doesn't exist. That feels like the the obvious place to start. If I'm going to go try to make a queryable or like connectable or whatever decision layer on top of everything, well, I got to start with everything, right? So it's almost like a compound startup approach is the way to win, right? Where you end up with the rippling, but for data, for company data. And maybe that's why no one's done it yet, is like incumbents are too focused on like the corner of their universe. And if you're a startup, you actually have to own something that the incumbents already own. I don't think that's the case. Like obviously like Slack or Notion is like, I would way rather write everything back to Slack or Notion right now, because probably Notion would be the obvious one, because that's where we're storing so much other context. And I would want it to be able to connect to Slack and pull in everything from Slack and continue to store context from every different source every single day. And then I need to go build the decision layer on top, right? Or how that interacts with other AI systems and like what to build or what to do on our marketing team.
Yeah, it feels like Slack has even like tried to do some of this stuff even, right? Like how often have you used like a Slack template or like a Canvas or these other things? It's like, I don't really want that, right? Like
I don't know if I've ever used a Slack template.
And so it's like, no, I think someone sent me one once and I refused to open it. I thought it was like malware or something. But like, you know, or like if Notion's AI, which maybe some people love and they use a lot. I never use Notion's AI, but like it exists, and it's like all these pieces exist in a fractured way, and like it doesn't make sense for a mental model for me for like any of those individual players to like try to become all of it. And I famously spent a lot of time in my career, famously to myself, at a company that tried to do it all and say that they were like the operating system for a business is what they were trying to pitch themselves as for a while, which is like maybe a cooler vision now than it was, but really they were just like a BI company. And it was like people didn't want to run their business only on like the BI platform. Turns out there's a lot more to like work and mind and relationships than like the charts that the platform is really good at making. And so it's hard for me to see like maybe we should place some bets. Like if there's a company that is capable of becoming that, it feels like it would be like Microsoft or Google, because they're the closest to the distribution of like the entire work experience for ICs. But even then, I would wager the closest is probably gonna be like someone like Snowflake or Databricks that like just uses everybody's APIs to eventually feed into one super warehouse.
Yeah. That's actually interesting. So you're almost like the data companies, historical data companies, like what the data they were tracking was not the data that's actually most useful in an age of AI. Like it's like product analytics or, you know, product engagement. The companies that have tracked all of the stuff that's valuable to AI, all the context, those aren't actually data companies historically. Like they don't know how to store and structure data. Like Slack is, you know, Slack and Notion, they are data companies, but they probably wouldn't like lead with that. So you almost have like Slack and Notion and Google and Microsoft that need to become data storage companies. And then you have like the data storage companies have to learn how to interpret like text and other things and feed it to the LLMs. So that's, I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why you have the problem. Let me give you one other interesting request for startup is startups that want to sell to huge companies, which initially I thought that was like startups that want to get acquired by huge companies. And I'm like, isn't that a lot of startups? It's startups that want to sell products to huge companies, which is a very broad category, obviously, but it's basically like saying, hey, we want to invest in startups that are trying to sell to Fortune 100s. And for the first time, we think Fortune 100s might want to buy from startups. Is that true? Did you Fortune 100s want to buy from startups right now?
Well, I think there's this interesting dynamic of you are feeling a lot of pressure as a big company in how dynamic the landscape is right now. AI is changing the way that consumers are thinking and behaving. It's changing the way your competitors are acting, but you are limited by how large you are as a company. So for example, I have a friend who he works at a very large defense tech company, and they're not allowed to use Slack because of it's not end-to-end encrypted. And so even though there is this like existing solution, given my unique needs as a large business, as a defense contractor, I can't use it. And so I'm like desperate now to have a tool that can support me in my unique use case. And so I think that's maybe more why is like there are just custom needs, and software lets you serve those custom needs better than it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned like the moat aspect of it earlier. The first VP job of the first engineering organization I was ever handed was actually at at a very small startup. I had to like clean house. I was basically 2 engineers for a little bit, starting to build over. And we had actually sold to a lot of very large companies, which was really rare because there's a lot of barriers to small startups competing here. One, there's like the compliance space. And then there's just like the overall cost of building enterprise solutions used to be so high that you kind of needed investment to build the product. And then you needed enough capitalization to withstand like a year-long sales cycle. And that's just like, that's a brutal combination for like unfunded small parties to try and compete with, which is why it took so much like capitalization to move. It's like evaluating it now, it's like, okay, the build is smaller. Like I can do it with a smaller team. I can do it faster with maybe my engineer employees, but like there's still the other hurdles that I need to go through of like compliance is a time intensive and expensive process that I think you still need some like backing to. And then there's just like these large companies have all these different constraints on what they're willing to buy and resource. And it's like that is interesting in the sense of like it's a moat. And so the difficulty of it is what makes it like scare off your thousands of single company vibe coded competitors. It's still kind of a hard path to go. I know there's like Vanta and some other people that like try to reduce like the friction it takes to get compliance and sell to these people. I mean, these major companies that are like, you're talking year-long sales cycles, and maybe they have the intent to reduce that, John. Maybe that's some of the points that YC is trying to say, but it still feels like that's so hard for small organizations to live with.
Yeah. I think that's very fair. Let me throw one last bucket out there, which is basically like the historically impossibly hard companies, which seems like they're requesting more than ever. So the bucket I would include electronics and space. Like, you want to start one of those in your dorm? Good luck. You're gonna go start a SpaceX or another NVIDIA. You have hardware supply chain, like historically brutal. Go compete with China's hardware supply chain. A separate one, industrial capabilities in space, and then inference chips for agent workflows. Right? So these are like legitimate requests for startups. Like, keep in mind, the average age of like the YC founder is probably like 19 at this point. It's like 21, 22. Like, these are young. Typically, they are known for funding like really young, inexperienced kids. These are the types of companies that need, $100 million seed rounds to get going. Is that like the era we're in? Which is like, it's either Anthropic or like an impossibly hard other problem that Anthropic's not going to go solve, or like, yeah, it seems like a very these are quite ambitious types of requests for startups.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love that this is the case because I would much rather live in a world in which people are saying, let's make manufacturing 100 times better by building it in space so you can move really heavy objects and not need to worry about gravity. Then we're building the 95th B2B SaaS product. Like, the way that can impact your day-to-day life is so much better if they're investing in real world things. So I love that this is the case. The other reality is, yes, like one of their requests was AI for personalized medicine. I actually totally disagree. I think LLMs are going to come in and eat the lunch of anyone who tries to do this. But like medical testing is this huge area where like an MRI still costs me $2,000. Even if Anthropic can interpret my results perfectly, the average person can't afford an MRI when they need it.
Yeah, I guess the reality of what that implies is like, that's amazing. Are you going to go start that? Like, you were way more likely to start a B2B SaaS company than something in space.
Don't ask Mike, because he might actually say yes. But I think the general you of like, man, the odds of success on those are, before it's already told like every startup is 1 out of 100 that they make it. And that's why a lot of startup advice has been like, go to B2B SaaS. It's the easy route. And now it's like, well, actually, we're going to go to like 1 in 10,000 companies make it. It's just such a hard thing without safety nets or like fallbacks to be able to pursue. Like, I've always wanted to go start a company, but it's been difficult for me logically to get over the like, W-2s are pretty great. Why take the risk? And now it's like the risk is like 1,000x more unlikely to happen. Just feels like a giant hurdle that would be easy to squeeze out a moderate amount of ambition, but maybe the most ambitious people are going to love it more than ever.
Well, I think some of the risks are going to go down over time, and they're already going down. Like, Claude just announced that they now can do CAD. And so you suddenly don't need to be hiring people to do CAD for you, or you can hire fewer people. And so like you can hope that over time, as AI gets better and can do more, the cost to get these companies off the ground goes down. And then two, investing risk is a real thing. And so maybe the reason you couldn't build this a few years ago is because no one would invest in it. But if there is a feasible path to investment, then it's like so much more likely.
I think that's I was gonna end it and try to get to one last topic in 4 minutes, John, unless you have a great final words, because I like.
I was going to say I don't know if those companies are actually more likely to get funded. I think I think the average like student in their dorm room trying to start an industrial space company it's an awesome ambition, and it's just like turns out like Jeff Bezos' second act after starting Amazon was a rocket company. Elon Musk's like seventh act was SpaceX. Like these are really freaking hard companies to do without an amazing network and capital source already. The worry that I have is like, yes, starting a company has never been easier, but it's also never been easier for Anthropic to eat you for breakfast. And so you either start a company touching the physical world, or if you're going to go start a technology company, like it's got to be very ambitious, or you're going to have to figure out some other like some other connection that's like I think starting a B2B SaaS company is just going to be interesting. It's going to be hard.
You need to pick hard. It's hard because I'm selling to farmers or government, or it's hard because it's the real world, or it's hard because some other reason. And if it's 10 times easier to start a business, the only businesses that are going to work are going to be the ones that are hard enough that not everyone goes there.
I couldn't stop thinking about the rocket example, because somewhat we're out here in Utah. Somewhat famously, a few years ago, there was a college student who tried to make rocket fuel and blew up his apartment here locally. Great local news story. I don't think anyone was harmed, but there was a verified volatile mixture that exploded into a fireball, triggering sprinkler systems and flooding the incident. So shout out the actual college students who are bold enough to try and make rocket fuel, I suppose. Not me. Maybe someday. We only got a couple minutes left. I wanted to play just a game real fast here at the end with you all, which is one of the frontier models companies just released their company values. And so I wanted to read them to you real quick, see if you and John and Mike can identify which of the frontier models these values reflect. So their first value is democratization. They will resist the potential of this technology to consolidate power in the hands of the few.
Doesn't sound like Claude to me.
The second is empowerment. We believe AI can empower everyone to achieve their goals, learn to be more happier and more fulfilled, pursue their dreams, and society as a whole will benefit from this. I'm going to keep going until someone wants to lock in their answer. Universal prosperity. We want a future where everyone can have an excellent life. 4, resilience. AI will introduce new risks, and we will work with other companies, ecosystems, and governments and society to solve them, which is an interesting one. And in adaptability, we continue to believe the only way to meet the challenges of a very unpredictable future is to be prepared to update our positions as we learn more. Those are the company values of...
None of them. None. I don't know how you could honestly say that. Well, they certainly could be their values, but democratization, we will resist the potential of this technology to consolidate power in the hands of the few. I mean, I guess like to me, power equals money in a lot of ways. And like, that's exactly what this is going to do, right? Like everyone will be able to use the technology, but we will be paying for it. And the price is not cheap. And the revenue numbers keep going up. And so do the house prices anywhere near those headquarters. I don't know. I mean, I think it's noble. I think it's noble for a nonprofit. I don't think any of them are nonprofits anymore.
I like the suggestion of Manus in the chat, but yeah, let's leave that question unanswered. That's a fun way to end it. I bet you could find the answer, but could you correctly identify your companies by the company values? I hope people could pick Leland out of a batch of our values. And to your point, I don't think you could necessarily figure out which AI frontier model that was based off of that.
You're gonna leave the people hanging?
Yeah, leave the people hanging. I mean, there's only so many. Fine. It was OpenAI. It was ChatGPT. They're the ones that are definitely not consolidating wealth into their own hands. They're doing it, John, because they love it.
I think the only honest answer in all of that was we will work with governments. And that's perhaps the only
We
thing that's
will work with governments to increase regulatory capture and make it really hard for anyone to compete with us. I say this as a loving admirer of the game they're playing. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the person that voted in our poll for ChatGPT, John. So I mean, we know you're authentic in your love for them.
I'm not a hater of these big model companies like many are. I think they are an inevitability, and you can't hate on them for pushing the future forward. But I think you got to hold them accountable, and I think we all got to figure out what this means for the world.
Oh, yeah.
Can I read one last quote before we go?
Let's do it.
So we had a board meeting yesterday, and those are always fun. And one of our board members, Yuri Kim, on her way to the airport, texted me a tweet from someone that was kind of reflecting on their experience moving to San Francisco. And I thought it was an interesting there was a bunch of interesting things that they reflected on. But I think that this reflection was, I think, particularly interesting to me. It says, quote, "Anyone paying attention here can feel that something massive is happening with AI. But I'm shocked by how little people talk about the meaning crisis coming next. Everyone wants to talk about AI liberating humanity. Almost no one wants to talk about what happens when work, the thing that gives most people identity, structure, dignity, status, and purpose, starts disappearing. The vacuum will not be peaceful. People are underestimating the chaos that comes from humans suddenly having no idea why they matter. And I really feel like no one cares." I think you could probably extend that to like several things, which is like, I don't know if we as humanity are fully ready for like the wave that's coming, but we got to talk about it. We got to explore ideas like we do here, and we got to figure out what the new normal looks like, and try to figure out how humans are the centerpiece of that, not technology. Anyways.
Well, yeah, let's do it again next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.